So, traditional Jewish, Christian, and Muslim.
Hi, Preston.
Hi, Jade. You want to start a church?
We already did.
It's true. We just need to make it more official.
Make it more official, but that's really hard to define.
Right? Religion is a tricky, fuzzy thing.
Isn't it, though? We'll talk about this more in today's episode of
The Holy Watermelon Podcast.
This is kind of fun. This is a little bit of a harkening back to some of our very, very early episodes.
Right. So we've talked about the difficulty of defining God pretty early on.
Yeah, like one or two, yeah.
And that's a bit of a trouble. The way I have to phrase this, I feel is decent. I put some thought into how I want to phrase this. That if you were to see religion walking about in the street, you would likely expect that you could easily recognize it. What makes it easy to recognize? Do you have an answer?
What makes it easy to recognize? Well, this is a loaded question considering Brent and I were just watching Under the Banner of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something like a vibe to religion as opposed to just like a sports club or a social club or whatever. How would I define it, though? You're asking me.
Do you think it's an easy thing to define based on just casual observation?
I think it's an easy question to answer with an asterisk because anything I say, you'll have a counter argument for.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right? So while all the things I could say would define a religion, they would also define non-religions, or there'd be not religions that fall under it.
Right.
So like, this belief in paranormal's the wrong word, the divine, right? Or sort of a zealousness to belief.
Sure. But there's loads of believers that aren't zealous.
Right, exactly.
And there's loads of religions that, they wouldn't agree with you on the definition of divine.
Yeah. And just like, there's a community aspect, obviously, but lots of things have community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a shared set of beliefs, but lots of things beyond that.
Ultimately, it's just a tricky thing. So there's this prejudice that we have as we operate through our community life, where if we see somebody join a cult, we expect them to be smart enough to recognize they've joined a cult. And yet...
we can't even define religion.
Right. And so we've got all these self-help groups that, they start out as a self-help group. Then somewhere down the road...
you're carving initials into your vagina.
Sure.
Nexium.
What was it? Carving into the vagina?
No, it was like it was on the pubic mound and the hip bone and very close. I mean, your vagina's inside, so no, but
right. So the carving would be quite inconvenient
and probably not look very good. Not that it looked good as is, but it was defined what it was.
Yeah.
1 minute you're doing self-help, 1 minute you're being branded.
Yeah.
A wild ride.
Right. So because it's hard to define religion to the point that people get themselves into trouble sometimes, maybe we should look at some of the experts in the field.
Okay.
So I took a whole class on this in university, and it is a mess. So I pulled out some highlights for us to share.
Thanks, Preston.
So Clifford Geertz from the University of Chicago and Princeton University defines religion as a system of symbols, which feels a little too nebulous.
I was going to say feels too vague, but same.
So the irritating thing is that it's pretty much the exact same way that he describes culture. And religion is for sure a kind of culture. But the definition is weak. His exact words that I love is a system of inherited conceptions expressed in symbolic form by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and attitudes toward life.
Okay.
Like, it's not completely unreasonable.
No, but it doesn't. It is broader.
It's not that helpful.
Yes. It's a good starting point.
Sure.
But that's all it is. But it does help in the idea of like, if you see religion walking down the street,
Sure.
that falls under that quite nicely.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's not enough to stop just anyone from registering a religious society.
Right. I like Emile Durkheim's definition. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So Emile Durkheim is one of those guys that if you're studying religious studies in university, you will encounter his writings, or your instructor has maybe deviated from the right path. So he defines religion as a shared distinction between sacred and profane. You've got these things that are set aside as special, and there's everything else that isn't. Usually this special is distinct from the common world in every measurable way, or in one really big important way, but it's not the common, it's not the dirty, it's not your everyday stuff. Like temples are meant to be this way, or, you know, the Bible is set apart from all other books because it's revered. But most other books are revered by somebody as well, even if it's not a holy text.
There's a market for everything, Pressed.
That's the truth.
James Martineaux, a 19th century Unitarian thinker, said, "Religion is the belief in an ever-living God." Eh.
We've definitely talked about religions in the last few years that don't fit this little cabinet very nicely.
Yes, so it rules out religions that accept that gods might not be mortal, and that those that have no interest in gods and are happy with the immortality of their own souls.
Yeah, like Theravada Buddhism, for example. But
then that rules out things, I think, immediately, like Wicca.
Right. Yeah, no, this guy is
I guess they have gods, but that really is more of a self-practice.
Right. He's looking at it from an angle of he's a Christian.
Right.
And all religions must be kind of like Christianity.
Oh, he is so sorely mistaken.
Right.
The more I learn. Then, of course, there's Friedrich Schleiermacher, an early 19th century German Reformed theologian. And he stipulated that the essence of religion consists in the feeling of absolute dependence.
I don't know if that's enough to describe a religion.
No, I actually really don't even like that one.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Because then you go back to something like Wicca that is trying to perform magic. And it's all in the act of doing as opposed to the act of worship. What are those two words? There's two types of religions. One is more the act, the thought, the belief, and one's more the practice.
You're talking orthodox and orthopraxis.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Yes. This feels like it eliminates orthopraxic religions.
Maybe.
Because specifically it says the feeling of absolute dependence.
Right.
Which feels more like a thought than an action.
Sure. Yeah. So it definitely ignores all the religions that teach about personal empowerment, the idea that you could become a god. We've talked about this in a pretty recent episode. But also, you can be an atheist and recognize that you've got no power in the universe, really.
You could be a baby.
Yeah. A baby who just looks up to their parents, worshiping your caregiver in exactly the same way a person might honor a god or revere a saint. It's all the same.
Sigmund Freud said it was a great error to describe as deeply religious anyone who admits to a sense of man's insignificance or impotence in the face of the universe.
At least I can agree with Sigmund Freud on something, even if I didn't spell it right in the notes.
That's fine. I figured it out.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
I think, well, what he's saying is that anybody looking up at the vastness of the universe should feel like they're insignificant, for sure. And to call that religious doesn't make any sense to him.
Yes, because, anyone should look up at all the stars and go, do I even matter? And have a full existential crisis.
Right.
On the regular. That's why I stopped stargazing.
That's fair.
And of course, there are countless other definitions that have been proposed in the last couple of centuries. Some of them will rule out shamanic traditions from around the world, or some forms of Hinduism, or all of Judaism.
Yeah. The way we talked about religion, especially in the first 100 years or so, it was mostly just, what is it about Christianity that makes it different from our political system?
Yeah. And then we learned that there's so many more religions out there.
Yeah.
And people are so weird, Preston.
Most people, wherever you are in the world, look at your own thing as the main thing and try to make sense of that before really thinking of everything else. Or maybe if you're lucky, you'll see something different and go, what is that?
What?
And then, of course, you have to map it onto your own understanding of your own system first.
Yeah.
And realize that doesn't work.
Yeah. It always leaves something out, and it's so easy to leave something out because religious beliefs are so vast, and the point I was getting to is so weird.
Yeah.
Like, you can get into all sorts of nooks and crannies of the internet, which I did. And there's some really weird beliefs out there. And so to have a definition that covers them all is difficult. I know sometimes they talk about like religion as like the explanation of what happens after you die. And that's not a terrible one.
Right.
That covers a lot.
Mm-hmm. But there are religions that also accept that you stop existing when you die.
Yeah. Or they don't deal with it at all. Shintoism doesn't deal with this at all.
Yeah, it's pretty light. There are some thinkers who have written stuff, but broadly, it's not dogmatic on that at all.
Yeah. So even that is a difficult definition. I think it's, again, a slightly better one as people kind of want to figure out why we're here and where we go.
Right.
But there's things that aren't religions that help you figure that out too.
Yeah. Even the idea of this sacred versus profane business, where you've decided something is special, and it can be yourself.
I just pointed at myself.
There's a problem with calling that innately religious too, because your favorite sports team, the devotion that some people show to their sports team certainly looks religious,
mm-hmm.
but is it fair to call it a religion? Or same with your political leaders, or Eric Clapton.
Layla. Yeah, and it's so funny because, like, I love this idea of religion walking down the street, and I think of like on a hockey night in the city,
mm-hmm.
and even then, it's still different.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've got their special priestly robes in our town, blue and orange.
But you know what? If a sports fanatic walked down the street versus a religious fanatic, it would still feel different, even though it would look the same.
Sure.
I think.
I would hope so.
Yeah. So even though they look the same, it means there's something special about the religious group, but we can't put our fingers on it.
Right.
Or the sports group, whatever, just they're distinct. So there's something defining,
mm-hmm.
but nobody can tell us what that is.
Yeah. Well, there have been riots that have been given a religious flavor and religious character, and same with sports, same with politics. Strong feelings certainly aren't related to religion alone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then we've got ideas like piety, which every time we talk about it in a dictionary, it's tied directly to religion,
mm-hmm.
whether it's a zeal or a devotion, something that targets usually a divine being. It's about how you are the vehicle of reverence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even reverence is a tricky thing. Do you revere a thing? What does that look like?
Worship.
It could be worship, but
I know, but this is all
anything.
The definitions are hard. Reverence, worship.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
Even honor.
Yeah. What's the other one they use in Catholicism where you don't worship saints, you veneration.
Veneration, yes, that's the word.
That's
the
like
veneration of saints.
You get beatified and then you get venerated.
Yeah, the veneration of saints is worship. It absolutely is. Even though every writer on the Catholic subject wants to, like except for the ones who are trying to slam them, say that they're different because worship is just for God. Yeah, but how do you delineate that? How is worship different than veneration?
What does worship look like versus... You can call it something different, but it looks the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where we live, the government places no regulations on what a person believes. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
And no belief-based stipulations on what qualifies as a religious society, which, I mean, it's beneficial to us. But again, I don't know if that's good. Canadian law protects the right to freedom of belief and freedom of assembly. And so it's up to the group to define themselves as a religious society by using words that distinguish them from a non-religious society.
Right. So you can use the word church or...
Fellowship.
Fellowship's a good one. That's the one we selected. You've got synagogue and mosque and whatever. But there's also some words that are on this list that delineate religious groups from non-religious groups. Fellowship is a weird one. Assembly is acceptable. It's like anyone can be an assembly.
Mm-hmm. I recently registered a separate not-for-profit as an association.
Yeah.
But that was for the not-for-profit naming as opposed to the religious society's naming. But
yeah, I don't think association was on that list for churches.
For us, but so tell our listeners what we've done.
So in May 2021, 3 years ago, I walked into the registry and registered the San Lenatus Fellowship as a religious society.
And tell everyone what San Lenatus means if they can't guess.
So San Lenatus is just Latin for holy watermelon, loosely.
San being saint or...
Yeah, saint or holy. And Lenatus actually means woolly, but it's the genus or species name for watermelon in Latin. Yeah, so it just felt right.
And this was a really hard, complicated process, right, Preston?
It was so easy.
It was
I got it all done in one day.
It was embarrassingly easy. So the government requires a $50 registration fee, and you need a nuance report, which is a name search, which costs about $50. Yeah. And you need to sign some papers.
Yeah. Half of the job is just making sure that nobody else is using the same name.
Yeah.
So that got done real quick.
Yeah, so that's interesting that just two schmucks recording a podcast can become a religion, but we have.
Yeah.
To be fair, we're not tax exempt yet. There's a few more hoops you have to jump through to do that. But we are a registered religious society. You can find us on a report of registered religious society.
What else can you find on this report, Katie?
Some really wild ones. There's hundreds. There's actually thousands. This list is 3,000.
Did you have any favorites jump out at you?
There was one called the Tuatha De Danann, which you'll remember from our Celtic mythology episode. And it's just like some guy who learned some Irish and now has decided he's a priest.
Nice.
There's one I looked up. I actually put it on our list for potential episode called The Faithists.
The Faithists.
It felt a little bit... it didn't feel danger culty, but it felt a lot like Heaven's Gate, where it was like New Age meets Christianity.
Okay.
A lot of these didn't have websites. Anytime I found a really weird name, I tried to see if I could find the website, and I would say more often than not, they didn't, if they were particularly weird. But that being said, San Lenatus Fellowship doesn't have a website either.
We got a page on our Holy Watermelon main website.
Oh, perfect. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of Christianity where we are, so that took a little bit to search through. I'm just on it right now and trying to see if I can find anything that stands out.
The Journey Church of God. I like that name. That's all right.
Yeah, like this is something I would look up. The ICA for the Sons of the Tarika Shatulia Yashrutia in Canada. I don't know what that is.
I bet it's not Christian.
I also bet it's not Christian.
Well, not everybody who can use the word church is Christian either, right? We got Scientology that for some reason will still use the cross in their iconography.
I didn't even check for Scientologists, but now I'm going to.
Yeah, they're around.
Oh, they're not on this.
Maybe our government says, no, you're not a church. That'd be okay with me.
Or they might not be registered
as a religious society.
In our province, but they can be registered as a religious society elsewhere.
Right. They can be registered federally and not provincially.
Yes.
We are registered provincially, but it's a pretty easy step to move from provincial registration to federal.
Yes. I found some Shinto shrines. I found some Hindu ones. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the volume of Christian churches. And then it is nice when you find a gem of someone.
Just going from memory, when I got the Nuance report, it gave us a list of names that felt close enough to be worth looking at.
Yeah.
And I mean, none of them were actually close, which was really nice. But one of them was a beer fellowship.
Oh, let's see if we can find it. It's an alphabetical order, but everyone, it is thousands of entries long. So
I might do it again.
Yeah, and then there's one that's sound Christian, but like not quite Christian.
Sure.
And I could be wrong. But there's Edmonton Omega Revival Fellowship. That doesn't sound quite Christian.
My instinct says it's got to be Christian, but that doesn't mean it is.
There's, again, the Faithist one, and I'd have to find it. It sounded almost Christian, but then I was like, there's no way that is Christian. So that's what Universal Faithists of Cosmon Church. And so I was like, that sounds Cosmon, yeah. And so that's why I was like, I was like, that almost sounds Christian. Like you could fool someone just on the side of the street.
Sure.
But it was pretty Touched by the Fire Ministries.
Where the old ways come alive. Look at that emblem, though.
I know. And it's all, anyway, there's a whole...
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. Once I downloaded this report, mostly to see if we were on it and saw some of the weird stuff and also knowing how easy it was to register as a religious society, I thought we could tell a little bit about what is a church. And I know church is like a predominantly Christian term. Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, I guess maybe broadly, what is a religious society? But we could have called ourselves a church with nobody had to check that we were Christian to use the word. Yeah. So the Oxford English Dictionary defines church as a building used for specifically Christian worship, but it can also refer to the institution of religion. So we talk about the separation of church and state. They're not talking about the building in that instance.
Right.
But more philosophically, Christians define a church as a group of people believing in Christ as opposed to, or the community is a better word than a group, to just a building.
Yeah.
So when they say you're a member of the church, they don't mean so much that you come to this specific building. They mean that you're part of the community.
Yeah. Church is a funny word that we misuse it a little bit in English. And by its nature, it's probably never going to be fixed. That it has the same meaning as an assembly.
Or even in the example I gave, faith, right? He's a member of the church. He's a member of the faith. Because if you think of the other two Abrahamic religions, you never say, he's a member of he belongs to the synagogue. Like, no,
But you definitely would say somebody belongs to a synagogue. But that's as like an organization.
Yeah,
thing.
They wouldn't say, But it feels like
level mean the same.
But it feels like Christians really use that word church as community more than other groups.
The old ecclesia means a group that is called together, an assembly. And church is usually treated as the modern English equivalent of that word. But yeah, we've also got chapel halls and temples and assembly halls and kingdom halls and whatever else you might have where people gather that's a little different than the church. Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of great opportunity here.
Yes.
So I figured we should talk about what does the San Lenatus Fellowship look like as a church. We're really small right now officially.
Yes.
But we can grow. I guess, one, does it make sense to gather people under a banner?
I mean, for the benefit of everyone, if we could be tax exempt,
right?
Then our dear listeners would get a write-off on their taxes and we could grow the podcast as planned. But our listeners get tax exemption from or they get the charity credit on their taxes.
Right. Well, and I've looked into what it is to file your taxes as a religion, that there's tax credits for if you live in a house that's owned by the church.
Do.
Now, I recognize the risk in our listeners being willing to sign over their homes to the church. I don't expect people to take that risk.
That's for you and me to do.
Right.
It's starting to sound like a cult for the tax benefit, but that's fine. Carry on.
There's the ability to perform marriages. Government of Canada is pretty strict on, like, if you're a religion, you have to meet certain requirements before you can start performing marriages.
Well, and interesting, in our province, and I don't know if this is countrywide, it's very difficult. So obviously you can do it religiously, but to just be... a
temporary marriage commissioner?
Yeah, to be a marriage commissioner, I don't even understand why. It's a very controlled job. The reason
for the permanent positions, it's very tightly controlled.
The reason I was given is that because there's so few, it like protects their... there's only so many people get married in a year that it like protects their livelihood. Right. But they would still need another job outside of even if there's only a handful, because we wanted a friend to marry us. And it was basically impossible for her to get the legal right to marry us. So we didn't end up doing it, but we're going to do it where we were married legally and then she performed the ceremony for funsies separately. So it is very difficult here, and you can't... It's more common in the States where you can get like a temporary license or join the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster and they'll let you do that. You can't even do that here.
Right. Yeah, you can get all kinds of online ordinations.
Ordination mills.
And most of them are, ordination mills are all kinds of fun. And a lot of the states, they're just fine. Up here in Canada, not very okay. Difficult. I'm not going to be able to perform a marriage. You can get a temporary marriage commissioner license for a commission for one day, one wedding. You're not allowed to charge for it. I've done it. It's kind of cool.
I feel like
it's kind of new here.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when we've only been married 6 years, and it was basically impossible. Yeah. We could not figure out how to get it done.
Yeah, I had another set of friends ask me to perform their marriage recently, too.
Yeah.
So I did one this year, but about the time you got married, I had another set of friends get married. They wanted me to do it. Couldn't do it. Couldn't make it fly.
So it's recent.
But now it's a lot easier. But it's just the one-time thing and you can't charge for it. Sure, it would be nice to charge for it.
Yes.
Make a little bit of money. Make a big show of it.
Yes, you can have a traditional San Lenatus wedding, which we'll define maybe in Discord what that looks like.
Yeah, I feel like this is a community discussion thing.
I feel like, you know how in Jewish weddings they smash the little glass cup?
Yeah.
We're going to smash watermelon.
Stomp on a tiny watermelon?
Or a giant watermelon, why not?
It's hard to stomp on a big one. It's true. A bigger target, but it's harder to really get what you're after.
Yeah, that's true. Fair. Okay.
But I like it.
I do too.
So I think, what I personally believe religiously, certainly not universal. Not even everything I believe is agreed upon by everybody within my religious community.
Also, that religious community already exists.
Yes.
So if people are interested in that, they have a place to go.
Yeah, they know where to go.
Yeah.
But what does Katie think should be at least the foundation of beliefs in the San Lenatus Church Fellowship?
You've written some values, which I like: education and humanity. I also, as an offshoot of education, critical thinking. Sure. I think it's very important. I like that you've personal belief in a specific God is out of the question. Non-belief is also a no-go. So I guess it's not an atheist religion, but I don't know.
I would say on the subject of God, the San Lenatus Fellowship is pretty comfortable in the realm of undefined agnosticism. That every individual can believe whatever it is they want to believe about, whatever God they want to believe in or disbelieve in.
Maybe some henotheism dashed in there.
Sure.
Just a little sprinkle.
Yeah.
Yeah. All gods are valid equally. And also not equally in non-belief.
That's complicated, and I bet it looks great in writing.
I bet it looks amazing in writing for the CRA. Yeah. I think the foundation of the Holy Watermelon is critical thinking and endless curiosity.
Ooh, I like it. Yep. Definitely.
I feel like you should take notes.
Do it. Write it down.
I hope this picks up my typing.
I think that it's, and we've been working on this a little bit over the years, of building a community. Community is far more important than what you want to believe about any specific thing, I think.
I think that's how all of them function.
Absolutely.
And the best ones continue to function or thrive.
Yeah.
It's the sense of community, because you're right, no one will agree on everything, on anything, on everything. Both. And like I said at the top of the episode, my husband and I are binge watching Under the Banner of Heaven. And even the difference in belief from Utah to Idaho is wild.
Yeah.
And I know you've lived some of that yourself. So within the same religious group, people don't even agree.
Right. I think it's fascinating. So we are registered with the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big step. That is great. We were hitting the 3-year anniversary this month.
Which is why this episode is happening.
Yeah, because we have to be registered with the government for 3 years before we can register anybody in the church as somebody who is legally licensed to perform marriages. Mm-hmm. So this is where you come in, dear listener. Far more than half of our audience is outside of Alberta. And so the question is, should we register nationally? That would be really cool. And locally within Alberta, to be able to perform marriages, there is actually a population requirement in the church. And it's a lot steeper than I thought it would be.
All right.
But we need the addresses, which, I mean, if somebody wants to give us a fake address, I'm not going to check. But we need the addresses of 100 members in Alberta in this church.
That sounds like there's going to be a Google form on our Discord.
Yeah, there's going to have to be.
Where it will be your official registration.
Yeah.
With the church, the San Lenatus Fellowship.
And we're willing to ordain ministers of even small sub-congregations. But that'll all be through our Patreon.
All right. So if you've been looking, searching, if you're on a spirituality journey, a spirit quest, stop looking. You found
your home.
You found your home. You're home with us in our
undefined agnosticism.
In undefined agnosticism in the community of the San Lenatus Fellowship. I'm going to add that note too. And I'm going to also type really loudly. I want everyone to picture Kermit at the typewriter.
Tippity-tappity, tippity-tappity.
Undefined agnosticism. I was like, what is that word? I'm having trouble with words today.
Words are hard.
Today they sure are. All right. That's what you got to do. So.
Yeah. And we're pretty committed to making this work and hope that you find value in it for yourselves.
Yeah. I'm the high priestess, I think, on the documentation.
And I'm the high priest.
Oh, perfect. So.
It'll be great.
It's perfect. We believe in gender equality. If you're one of those religions and you're not feeling it.
Right. Yeah. All the good things.
Yeah. This is just like, think of a religion and then that you're okay with, and then take out all the parts you hate, and that's the San Lenatus Fellowship.
I like it.
We're the one true church.
Also, if you want to rock some church merch.
Terrible.
We've got our spread shop where we've got not just clothing, but tote bags and water bottles and mugs and everything else.
Stickers, pens.
Yeah.
Dog bandanas.
Yeah. It's a pretty diverse bundle of stuff. I love it.
Yep.
And Patreon, as I mentioned before, we don't only ordain people, but you can also find other exclusive content on there, extended versions of most of our interviews, and Katie's special Bible study.
Yep. Please interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Discord, and Instagram. Discord is where we'll post the registrations to join the San Lenatus Fellowship. And we have lots of great conversations there too.
Thanks for joining us.
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecies had fulfilled itself.